This conference will now be recorded.
All right. Good evening and welcome to the Milwaukee Public Library Book Chat. Each month we focus on a different theme and occasionally bring guests in from the community. This month we're wrapping up our 2020 reading with our favorite books of the year. My name is Beth. I usually work at the East Branch, and I'm here tonight with my esteemed colleague Mary, who usually works at the King Branch, and Gabby, who is one of our really awesome patrons from our summer reading book chat program that we thought we would bring in today to talk about her favorite books of the year. She was one of our most active summer reading participants and wrote some amazing reviews. So we reached out to Gabby and asked if they'd like to join us tonight. Welcome, Gabby. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, which one of the branches you usually go to, and why you decided to do the book by book challenge this summer. Gabby, can you hear me?
Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Hi. I'm Gabby. I'm 24, and I go to the Tippecanoe branch recently, or Tippecanoe branch always, because I live like a mile from it. So that's good. And yeah, I was just really glad that you invited me on for this. I liked participating in any sort of reading program.
Very good. Well, I put your 3 books that you chose that were your favorite this year for your reading. I know I picked up one of them myself based on the review that you wrote for it for the book by book challenge. I have it right here. So why don't you go ahead and tell us about Writing in the Wild to start?
Yes, I've got a copy of that, which is very important because one of the best parts about it are these gorgeous portraits of each of the writers that Catherine Alto talks about in the book. She kind of goes over different genres of nature writing that women have delved into, like over the past, like from the present back to probably like the 1900s, early 1900s. So she gives little lists of books by the authors that she talks about, and then the bios on them are super short, super easy to read, and really interesting. With like I'm not someone who reads biographies on people unless I'm like really interested in them. So this is a great intro to like to a lot of people in a short amount of time is the best way to put it. I think like the only it's a good read, especially for people who want to be a nature writer or enjoy nature in general, I guess. Like I enjoy nature writing, but I was never really sure on what that meant, and Catherine Alto really makes it clear that it can be basically anything you want, as like all the women she highlights have shown. So yeah, it's really beautiful, and now I have a book list from that like covers all these different writers, and I'm really excited about reading more.
That's excellent. I love those compilations, and the illustrations look just gorgeous. I'm going to put that one on hold. How about Weird But Normal?
So I don't have a copy of that one, but you showed it. I wish I had one, but then I'd spend too long like reading bits of all her essays. um, so basically, it's a coming of age essay collection that Mia Marcato wrote. She's pretty young, and she's from the Milwaukee area. She's actually from around north of Milwaukee. So she talks about her like her racial identity and growing up in the Midwest and mental health and workplace dynamics, relationships. Um, and she really infuses her like quirkiness into all her essays while still making them feel like very much like an older sister sort of vibe, like someone who makes fun of you but also teaches you really important things about life. um, and she has I she's worked for Hallmark before, which was an interesting, like, there's a whole essay about what she learned from there, and she loved it. So I think it's a good book for anyone who's kind of looking for like a change in their life in some way, like a career, and just it really helps you see the bigger picture, especially for young people. I think like I learned a lot from her mistakes, I think.
Very good. And then if you can go ahead and talk about your next one. It's cutting off the title for me because I have everybody's cameras on.
Oh, Raising Our Hands. So the other two books are kind of like, you know, like when people do best or like favorite book of the year roundups, it's usually like these books made me feel good and happy, and Raising Our Hands for me kind of makes me feel sad and like angry at the world. But I think that's such an important thing for a good book to do also, which is why I chose to talk about it. So it's written by Jenna Arnold, who's a white woman who wants to talk to other white women or anybody of privilege in the U.S. about race and the like truthful histories of the U.S. And there's a lot that I was very shocked by because, I mean, I went to school through school more recently than she did, and still like the like false, just the cover-ups of the way that I don't know, people have been treated in the U.S. Were the most shocking to me, and she kind of proposes that since white women have such power, political power in the U.S., because there's like over it's what's the fact 55% of white women voted in the last election, which is like a huge amount. So if we get all these people who have this voting power to understand and vote for the right things and for other people's rights as well instead of just their own, then it can like completely shift how our country is and how it's run. So that was empowering. It very much bounces between empowering and sad, and then empowering again, which, you know, it goes on. It's a pretty big book too, but I read it fairly quickly, and I put all these tabs in it, which I posted a picture on Instagram, and she was super happy about that. So yeah, she's great.
That's always a mark of a great read when you're compelled to mark the passages and take notes. And I haven't heard of this one, which is too bad for me. So it's definitely heading onto my list immediately because I think, you know, we hear about the big three a lot that people were ordering and getting this summer. And I'm going to flip over to our next slide, which will show the top books that book by book our summer reading challenge participants read. So a lot of these are going to look really familiar to people.
Wow.
So we've got White Fragility, Where the Crawdads Sing, How to Be an Anti-Racist, Educated. Those were kind of the top. And then a few others. I'm not going to read all of them off for you. But the one we wanted to highlight, I'm going to throw it over to Mary now, is Britt Bennett's The Vanishing Half, which, go ahead, Mary. It's on a lot of lists this year.
Yeah, this is a book that has been getting a lot of attention and is on almost all of the book lists. This was a favorite of Amanda's. She's a librarian in the Wisconsin Talking Book and Braille Library, and it's called The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. Amanda says this multi-narrative title embraces the saying, "The blood calls." It touches on the subject of race in America between the 1950s through the 1990s, as the Vigness twins are separated for more than half of their lives because one twin, Stella, chooses to pass as white in California, and the other, Desiree, stays in Louisiana and always wonders about her other half. Both women have daughters who find each other in the most unlikely circumstance and establish a connection of their own.
All right. So as Mary said, that was one of our other colleagues' top choices. And you can see it was also recently announced as the Library Reads top pick of 2020, and it won the Goodreads Awards Best Historical Fiction nomination, which was just announced yesterday. So I wanted to make sure to pull those recommendations. I have a copy here. Again, this is one that is on my list that I haven't gotten around to reading yet. Reading's been a little bit of a struggle for me in the pandemic, but my list is ever long and I'm always looking to add more books to it. I wanted to highlight Library Reads as a resource that patrons can look up if you're looking for things to read or things to add to your own personal TBR or to be read piles. Each month they highlight 10 picks that librarians across the United States nominate and make sure to get in front of our eyes. And then at the end of the year, we all get to vote and pick our favorites that we liked. So this one was the top choice. And if you're following along, don't worry, we will either email you or send you the list of all the books that we talk about tonight, so you don't have to worry about feverishly taking notes. If you registered with your email address, we'll have that. Otherwise, you can send your email address to myself and Mary, and we'll get you that list by the end of the week. Gabby, have you read this one?
I've definitely looked at the cover like 6 times, and I never actually got a copy of it.
That's okay. One to add.
Yeah.
All right. Something else I want to make sure to highlight is Hoopla. I'm sure a lot of you are using Hoopla right now with your library cards. It's available to you. You just need to know your barcode number and your PIN. If you don't live in the city of Milwaukee or have a Milwaukee Public Library card, just make sure to check with your local library. Hoopla is really great because they will put lists together that will include the must read or the best books at the end of the year. So I just pulled these 2 that were interesting. So you can download these right away, either to listen on audiobook or to read on your phone or tablet. So this is the Time Must Read Books of 2020, and then the Rising Stars, which is best debuts of the year. I have to go ahead and shout out Lakewood, which we read for one of our book clubs here at the library this year. It was really creepy and compelling and kind of atmospheric medical horror story. So if you haven't read that one, I really recommend it. All right, and then Mary, go ahead and talk about Cat's Pick.
Yeah, this is another librarian. This is Kat. She is in our children's department. And she said The Empire of Gold by S.A. Chakraborty was her favorite book of 2020. She says this is the stunning final book in the fantastic Devabad trilogy, an epic fantasy series steeped in history, magic, and Middle Eastern folklore. It'll make you scream and cry and cheer, and recommend it to every single person you know.
Very cool. I held a copy of that one recently in the library, and it is really thick. So if you're looking to jump into a complete trilogy that will really keep you going through the winter, I really recommend it. It's got a lot of pages and it's really compelling to read. And I love Kat's picture. All right, so let's talk about my books. I had a hard time only picking 3. It's always hard to choose. So I tried to pick one from different genres, so I wouldn't be too heavy in one place or the other. My first choice is a graphic novel, actually, and I've been waiting for this book for a really long time. It's taken Allie Brosh almost 10 years to come out with a follow-up to her original graphic novel, which was based off of her online blog. That first book was called Hyperbole and a Half, and this one is called Solutions and Other Problems. It really came at the right time for me during this pandemic, and it's just something that hit it made me laugh and it made me cry, and it just is really worthy a successor to her other book. And I didn't have kids when I read her first book, and now I do have 2 small children, and while they are probably not quite at her level of impetuousness, she really made me appreciate my kids, who definitely give me a run for my money every day. Maybe not on the level of the Richard story in this book, but definitely in their own way. So I highly recommend this one. You can read it either all at one crack, or you can try to savor it slowly, which is what I tried to do. Okay. Love Lettering is a book that I am just absolutely in love with, for lack of a better word. Here's one of my copies. I own 2 print copies, the ebook, the audiobook, and I should probably give one of my print copies away, but I'm not going to because I love it that much. I probably read or listened to this book 4 or 5 times in the past year. It was released on New Year's Eve of 2019, but I included it because I obviously read it in 2020. It's just a gorgeous, and really the language, it made me, after I read it, the main character, she is a calligrapher and hand letterer, and the language is so evocative that I actually had a dream of like somebody lettering in my sleep after reading this, and it's just a perfect book. So if you can get a copy, I highly recommend it. And she has a next book is coming out in February of 2020, so you'll be ready for that one if you read this one. They're not connected, but she's just a great writer. Okay, and then I guess I didn't cheat, but I picked a backlist book to highlight for my third choice, because after many years of people asking me and telling me to read N.K. Jemisin's The 100,000 Kingdoms, I finally took it on. I read it with a couple of my internet friends. We opened up like a text chat and we did a book club with it just on our phones. And it was really a great one to read with a group of friends because it's such a dense sci-fi fantasy story. And it was great to kind of unpack each chapter as we went along, but at our own pace. So if you don't want to do a traditional book club with people, I do recommend just doing like a Facebook message or a Twitter direct message thread with your friends while you're reading over the pandemic. So this one is the first in the trilogy, but I read it and it does stand alone. There will be characters that return in the books that follow, but you can definitely just read this one on its own. Any questions so far from the chat? I didn't notice any.
I don't think, nope, there are none.
Okay, great. So let's move on. So those were my 3 that I finally whittled my list down. And then over on Twitter, I wanted to highlight there's a couple end of year kind of challenges and hashtags going along. I'm participating in one. It's hashtag libfaves20. So librarians and library staff are encouraged to share one each day of their top 10 books of 2020. So I cheated here and give you 2 more that I really liked. These were my day 1 and day 2. It started yesterday. So I really liked this romance short story collection called Uptown Collection by Ruby Lang. There are 3 stories set in New York City featuring different couples. My favorite is about a divorced couple in their late 40s who decide that they need to share an apartment in New York so they can get a better apartment because they can't afford rent on their own, which feels very real to me. And they figure out they're still in love, and it's just really great and very emotional. And then You Had Me at Ola is by Alexis Daria, that came out this summer. And if you like soap operas and kind of behind the scenes TV industry drama and emotion, this is a perfect choice for you. So if you are on Twitter, I encourage you to click on that hashtag because you'll get, I'm filling up a notebook with all the recommendations from people that I'm following. So it's a lot of fun. Okay, I'm gonna throw it back over to Mary.
Well, this is from Derek, and he is our research and policy expert. His favorite book of 2020 was Leave the World Behind by Rumaan Alam. He says, when I heard this book was already being adapted by Mr. Robot creator Sam Esmail and starring Denzel Washington and Julia Roberts, I had to add it to my to-read list. There's a bit of a wait for it now at MPL, but get in line quick because the hype is warranted. At a brisk 241 pages, this book was a total blast to read, which I did in 2 sittings, and easily my favorite of 2020. And my favorite reads of 2020 were Circe by Madeline Miller, Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens, and The Heirloom Garden by Viola Shipman. I was about to write down my thoughts about Circe when this came in from Judy, our Associate Library Director of Technical Services. She says, Circe is an exquisitely written book about the little-known Greek goddess Circe. She received far little attention in Homer's The Odyssey and was brought to life by Madeline Miller. It piqued my interest in learning more about the Greek myths. That is exactly what I was going to write. Where the Crawdads Sing tells the story of a young girl named Kaya who was abandoned by her mother and pretty much everyone else in her family. Uneducated and presumably wild, she is known as the Marsh Girl. Kaya is drawn to two men, Chase, whose intentions are questionable, and Tate, torn between his love for her and his love for nature. When Chase ends up dead, all eyes turn to the Marsh Girl. And the Heirloom Garden is about a woman who, in the short span of a year, loses her husband and her daughter. Torn apart inside by the loss of these two most beloved, she withdraws behind a wall where she silently tends to her garden and sees no one, until one day a little girl moves in next door with her family and develops a keen interest for growing a garden.
All right, that's just Judy's awesome blurb for Circe, which I also really enjoyed this here too. It was really excellent. And then I just wanted to highlight a couple more places that you can check out to, again, find things to read or kind of see which books were hitting those year-end lists. NPR's Book Concierge is a personal favorite of mine. They organize their stuff in a really fascinating way, and you can click on all the different filters to kind of narrow or broaden your choices. And they include all age ranges in their recommendations, which is also really fun. NetGalley is another resource that I really like to use, and also highlighting book page, which is on there. So we will send you all those links as we come to the end of our program. We'll send you a list later. And then my question for all of you who are here tonight, how do you choose your books? If you want to share in the chat, or in just a minute or two, we will open it up to everybody to talk if you want to talk out loud. Here's some local sources that I wanted to also showcase. So the Journal Sentinel recently in November picked out 40 new books for holiday gifts in 2020. I know we're getting close to the end of the year, but you can always order these from the library or find them elsewhere, including Boswell Books, which is another great place to look for reads. They picked out their top 25, so that is on Boswell Books and Company's website. All right, and then we did obviously have more staff picks. We asked our colleagues to send us their favorites. So here's just another selection of those. I won't read all the titles, and we will send those to you, but very varied, and it was great to see everybody's choices this year. All right. Before we click off on the recording, I just want to encourage everybody to keep up with the library. Now that we've gone back to curbside service only, you can visit mpl.org/stay connected, and you can follow us on social media for a full listing of all of our virtual programs. I'm so excited that I will be running the secondary for this interview with Satonia Westenroy, who is the owner of Niche Book Bar, which is it's opening in Milwaukee here, and will focus on offering books for all ages by Black authors. Specifically, she'll be interviewed by my coworker, Paul, on Thursday, December 10th at 6 p.m. So I hope to see you all there. All right, and then Book Chat will continue on into 2021. So we're planning our slate of programming for next year, but we will see you back here for Book Chat on Tuesday, January 12th at 6 p.m. I'm going to go ahead and shut my screen sharing down and turn the recording off. And then if you want to turn your cameras on and talk out loud, we can share other people's favorite books of the year as well. So just give me 1 second while I do that.